The term layering came out of what we try to describe as a collaboration. We always feel that the practices that have two main architects working together sometimes try to push forward a unified message. And the more mediatic person of the practice happens to be the one that gets more exposure, because he is the person who is describing what's the purpose of the practice, what is the message. And because we did a PhD separately, and we found out that we look at the city in different ways, both of us, we wanted to describe this collaboration as two people with two different approaches on a single project, and how this is in fact a layering of intentions, of agendas over what we do in our practice. The way that we work on the city also has to do with the layering of agendas on a very complex city that is not easy to work with, because the administration of the city doesn't have vision on how the city needs to develop. And the city itself is under a very strong financial pressure and real estate pressure. So whatever we are used in Europe to have as public spaces, collective spaces, in Macau is completely forgotten by the administration. So it is a burden to the architects to put it back into the design.
The exercise becomes very interesting, and Macau is an interesting laboratory because this context of extreme density allows for overlapping and multiplication of the ground floors, working with section to take most advantage of each piece of land, of each plot. And we really can multiply the city and make a lot of things happen, because if we're waiting for the master plan to respond to social issues, to public space, to mobility, access to quality of life, it's never going to happen. So we have taken upon ourselves to the practice to really respond through a master plan of resistance.
Chinese people tend to occupy and appropriate public spaces. So everywhere in Macau where there is a shade, you will see people doing Tai Chi, or you will see people, relaxing. It is very common people bring their own furniture outside and use the outside space as an extension of their living environment. And thus what I studied in my dissertation was exactly how to include these spaces into buildings, and how you can leave them open for people to appropriate at will, knowing that the culture of the city will do that eventually. We did develop that mostly in our social housing. We have two buildings, social housing buildings built in Macau. One is called Phai Chikai. The other one has a boring name. It's called B10. And in both of these buildings, what we did was to cleverly arrange the number of flats that were required in order to leave a size of 1.5 flat per floor, which is an open space, and it is connected to the main corridors, so people can exit their houses, which are very, very claustrophobic, and use the common space at every level.
In some of the projects, we have been working very near important monuments and historic sites, and we have worked very hard to convince the government and the clients not to build anything near this heritage, and also how to create extensions and preserve the views of the old waterfronts through the new waterfronts. So we are using the project sites as an experiment to resolve this and reconcile the scale of huge infrastructure with very delicate monuments that were there because of some geographical proeminence with the sea or with the hills. And so if you just build anywhere around these monuments, the buildings are still there, the stones are still there, but they completely lose their meaning and their significance in the urban realm. the most recent projects that we designed during the PhD process, the Barra Station and the Barra PTI, they are sitting right next to very significant monuments of the old waterfront, the old fort, the old docklands. And we managed to sink not only the station, but the bus terminus. It sank 20 meters underground, so that the bus terminus is actually the public square. It's just the roof. So that was a really important exercise of negotiation. And it's really interesting because in the end, the station is a huge footprint, but we added an urban park on the roof. So the fact that it's huge, it's good because it's a huge park. It's not a huge building block.
I believe that the government and ourselves, maybe we haven't yet developed a technique for that, but just being here in Venice, and looking how Venice cope with these issues, the tourist tax, the way that residents has priority in the Vaporetto, and the way I think Macau can learn a lot from a place like this, because as it is now, there is nothing to protect residents. And there are not that many government policies, at least to distribute the tourism towards the whole city center, because at this time we only have a few special routes for tourists that are very, very crowded. And there is, not even a policy in how to change the tourism industry, which was what we were talking a little bit about yesterday at the book launch. Macau needs to reconvert the gambling into a healthier tourism industry.
The significance of the heritage site has to be based on the consensus of the people living there. So this exercise of engaging the people and making people understand collectively why the heritage is important is a real hard and slow process. So this is a very interesting exercise. Either side, maybe I can be involved, not as a missionary, but as someone who is engaged with the discussions, trying to understand where are the gaps and why the conversation is not to the point. So I'm very, very interested in that. Actually, in my dissertation, I came to a point that I realized this is actually what makes my contribution to the project so important, because in many instances we are not designing what we always imagine we would be designing, because we are taking in all these layers of information and feedback through the government departments, but also through the communities, and we are developing the projects towards a place that is absolutely not what an Italian or a Portuguese architect could imagine he would be, putting up in the city.